Okay guys, so here's the original Game Boy. Of course I've shown you this before. This model came out in 1989, and well, if you don't know much about it, you should probably watch my review. Otherwise you probably do. Now this is the Gameboy Pocket. This came out in 1996. It's the same hardware that's in the Game Boy. It's no different. It's just a smaller version of it. Runs off AAA's. And by 1996, a lot of developers were bugging Nintendo. They wanted a more advanced handheld, and a lot of consumers were too. They wanted something color. I mean, by 1996, it was kind of lame to just keep coming out with new versions of the original Game Boy. So they started working on a color system. This is the Gameboy Color. This came out in 1998, came out in October in Japan, and just a month later, November, in the US and Europe. It's powered by an 8-bit processor. It's a Z80 clone made by Sharp. Very similar to the processor, of course, in these ones here, except it runs at 8 megahertz, which is basically double the speed. It's got 4 times the RAM inside of it, and it can address more ROMs, so the cartridge sizes could be up to 8 times bigger in the cartridge. It could display up to 56 colors on screen at a time, out of a total palette of 32,768. It's backwards compatible, as you can see here, so it will play your original black and white games. Adds a little bit of color to them, but for the most part they're pretty similar to playing them on the older system. But they did make Game Boy Color games. Unfortunately, I don't have any to show you. They look like this. They come in a clear cart, and they don't have the little notch. They don't have the little notch in the corner. The reason is, if you put a Game Boy Color game in an original Game Boy, when you try to turn it on, it won't be able to turn on because the lack of a notch for this little lock to go into won't let you turn the power on. The system itself is only marginally bigger than the Pocket. It's maybe a few millimeters taller and a little bit thicker. It bubbles out in the bottom, whereas the Pocket's flat, and that's a good thing because A, it actually makes it a little bit more comfortable to hold, and B, it allowed for them to put AA's in it. So unlike the Pocket, which runs off AA's, I hate AA's, I never have AA's lying around when you need them. This thing just runs off AA's, so that's nice. Let's see, we got your volume on the one side with your link port. Got your power switch on this side. There's no notch on this one. You just slide the power switch up. Cartridge slot in the back. Of course, it's the same size and shape because it's backwards compatible, like I said. On the bottom, you got your headphone jack and your DC power outlet. And on the top, we have an infrared port. That's something that they added to the Game Boy Color. It allows for a wireless transfer with other Game Boy Colors. If the game supports it, you could simply transfer information from one Game Boy Color to another just by pointing it at each other. It also allowed for some homebrew, and I believe the game Mission Impossible, to act as a TV controller. You could actually run your TV and change channels and change the volume from your Game Boy Color just by pointing it at your TV. So that was pretty neat. I always liked the fact that they had the infrared port on this one, and I don't know why they took it off the Game Boy Advance. I think that's an option they should have kept. But anyways, when the system launched, it came out with 5 colors, and they're the same colors that make up the color logo of Game Boy Color. So there's this like strawberry color, there was purple, there was the lime green, which of course this one is, there was your yellow, and there was your blue. They also came out with a see-through purple one called Atomic Purple. And there was a lot of limited colors Some here, a lot in Japan. There's a lot of limited colors like black and stuff like that released in Japan. There's Pokemon versions, of course, special editions like that. But anyways, like I said, I don't have any Game Boy Color games to show, so I'm going to show a few quickly here just off an emulator. Here's Mario. This is Super Mario Brothers Deluxe. This was one of the games I bought for my Game Boy Color when I had one back in the day. Back in '98 when it came out, I bought one. And this is a pretty good game to show off the, the color and stuff. Is bringing back the classic. They also added a lot of little extra features and puzzles and fun Nintendo-related things. Okay, so let's take a look at an old game running in the Game Boy Color. Here's Super Mario Land 2. And if you turn it on, get a good look at the screen. Like I said, it will add a little bit of color to the old games. As you can see there. There's a little bit of a blue and a little bit of a, looks like an orangish color. Not much. It's really very, very limited. And you can do some color codes. Turn off the system. When you turn on the system, hold down a combination of A and B or the D-pad, and you've got like 8 different combinations that you can do with the colors. For example, if you hold down left and B while you turn it on, let me just put the camera down for a second. Hold down left and B while you turn it on, it goes into black and white mode. So if you like just playing the games in black and white like they're supposed to look, go to that same spot in the game. There you can see it's just in black and white like it would look on the Gameboy Pocket, for example. And you got different combinations, so you can try them, and maybe with certain games you like the certain combination, certain color look to it. So that's a little secret some people may not realize. It's not really a secret because it's in the book, but a lot of people didn't realize that you could do that. There's also games that worked on both, and they usually came in like a dark colored case. I believe it was like a black case, and they usually said like compatible with Game Boy Color or something on them. They would work in the old Game Boy and in the new Game Boy Color, and you'd get something like 16 to 20 colors. That was kind of like in between. It just had some extra code for the Game Boy Color, but it wasn't as good as a full-out Game Boy Color game. Something like Mario Tennis, you could achieve better color, better graphics with than the games that ran in both. So there you have it, the Game Boy Color. Nice little system. It's my favorite way to play the original games, because the screen is easier to see than the original Game Boy. The original Game Boy, the screen's a little hard to see. You need a lot of light, and even then it's a little blurry. The screen's better on the Pocket. It is a little bit sharper, the contrast is a little bit brighter, and it doesn't get as blurry when stuff moves, so it's easier to see. But it runs off AAAs, and it's not as comfortable to hold. This one runs off 2 AAAs, a little more comfortable to hold, and the screen is the best to see. So it's my favorite way even to play the old Game Boy games, and of course I've got to maybe pick up a few Game Boy Color games like Mario Deluxe, which was a good game. But anyways, there you go. That's the Game Boy Color.